Katalina Simon is a Hungarian-British photographer who moved to the US in 2004, influenced by her bicultural upbringing. Her work has focused on visual and oral history and personal narrative.
Oh,
Katalina has exhibited her work at the Griffin Museum of Photography in Winchester, Massachusetts, Photo Place Gallery in Middlebury, Vermont, and Fountain Street Gallery in Boston, Massachusetts also. Katalina holds a BA in Russian from the University of Bristol in England and is a graduate of the post-bac photography program at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. Katalina is currently pursuing an MFA in photography at MassArt. I actually accidentally found Katalina's work in our library not long time ago and then recognized the name, and it really sounded Hungarian. So I reached out to Katalina and we started talking, and I am very, very pleased to have you here. And I'm glad that you will be sharing all of your nice latest works and photographs. So please welcome Katalina.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's such a nice introduction, and it's a real honor to be invited. So I will start my presentation. I hope everybody can see that.
Yes,
So
look good.
it looks good. So the work that I want to show you today is a body of work that I did between 2018 and 2019. It's called The Land Beyond the Forest, because as some of you probably know, that was the Transylvania in Latin translates as the land beyond the forest. Before I show you all of the pictures, I'd like to explain a little bit about my background and my approach to this body of work, because I think it'll help you understand why I photographed the way I did. So as Emesha said, I grew up in London, but as you can see from these pictures, this wasn't London. My parents left Hungary in 1956 and went to England. So I was born in London, but every summer we would go back to a village which was just outside of Szombathely called Vép, where my grandfather was the village doctor. And my summers in Vép were idyllic. It was a sort of perfect place for a child who was growing up in central London to go in the summers. I had lots of local friends. I would spend my days roaming the village and going to people's houses, having zsíros kenyér, málnaszörp. You know, it really was paradise for a child, and I wasn't aware of any political or poverty issues, because for me as a child, it was just so wonderful. And as with a lot of people whose families are separated, photography was an incredibly important part of our times in Hungary. Because we only went once a year, we would spend so much time trying to capture and hold on to those wonderful summer memories. So then in 2017, my father passed away, and following his death, I had this overwhelming desire to kind of recapture the happiness of my youth and to sort of somehow connect with that slightly older generation. But of course, Hungary has changed a lot since I was a child in the 70s and 80s. And so when I went back to Vép, it's changed a lot. People no longer have animals. People aren't out in the fields. Everybody's commuting to work. And so I decided to try and go to Erdély, because I had heard and I had friends that there, that traditional Hungarian way of life still existed. So I drove down to Erdély. My first trip was in the springtime, and I went to the Maramuresh region. And the way I photographed was I was just driving around. I stayed in some bed and breakfasts, and I would walk around villages, and I would try and talk to people, and sometimes a conversation would last 5 minutes, sometimes it would last half a day. What I found was that people, especially in the springtime, were very busy with their animals, with their fields, and people were very open and friendly and curious. What was this sort of strange British, American, Hungarian woman with a camera doing, and why would I be interested in them? And so this gentleman was sitting out on his front stoop with his sheep when I approached him, and I had a very nice chat with him. And we ended up having a drink together, which tended to be that happened quite a lot. I would find that by the end of the day, when I'd get back to my little Ponzio, I was a little sort of lighter on my feet. But it was a wonderful way to interact and to meet people. And the days didn't really have a set structure, and there were days when I wouldn't meet really anybody, but there were other days that I'd end up spending the whole day, in somebody's home or, garden. And as I mentioned before, springtime was a great time to go because people were very busy trying to sow their fields and get ready for the summer. Now, my way of photography, if you look at these pictures, you're probably thinking, well, this is very romanticized. This is very, if you drive around Transylvania, there's a lot of poverty. There are holes in the road. There's trash on the side of the road. There's, dogs on chains. It's not all beautiful, but that's not what I was looking to capture. This isn't supposed to be a documentary project where I'm showing you what Erde looks like day to day, because of course you're going to see all of those things. This was a way for me to kind of recapture that magical feeling of my youth. And an image like this, this was one picture that I spent a whole day, well, not a whole day, but I spent a few hours with this lady, and I probably took 200-300 pictures. But for me, this is the picture that captures that fairy tale feeling of, an old lady, a chicken and a cat. I mean, it sounds almost like a story. Unfortunately, as a lot of the people who I'm taking pictures of are quite elderly, and on a subsequent visit, I went back to this lady's house and learnt from her daughter that she had passed away. So when I would go back on my subsequent trips, I always took prints of pictures to give to people. And they were always so super appreciative to receive pictures. And in the case of that lady, her daughter was particularly thankful. Now, a lot of people, when I would ask to take their picture, would say, oh, but I'm not dressed nicely. Why would you want to take a picture of me? And so it would be, I'd have to sort of negotiate and say, but I think you look lovely. I think, you remind me of my childhood. And I'd sort of explain to them what it was that I was trying to capture. This lady, she told me she was 88 years old, and she was still doing embroidery without the use of glasses, which I just found extraordinary, that at the age of 88, she could still be doing this fine cross stitch and she didn't need glasses. So, I thought that she was truly lovely. She also tried to sell me quite a lot of her embroidery, but that was fine. Oops, let's see. My presentation is, there we go. And so the best time to sort of meet people would be first thing in the morning and last thing at night, because people would like to sit outside, and this family was waiting for their cows to come home. Every morning, a boy would come and he would ring his bell, and all the cows would be led out onto the street. And there'd be a long, long row of cows, and the boy would take them to the pasture. And then at night time, the cows would come back and people would stand outside waiting for their cow to come back. And it was amazing. The cows seemed to know which house they belonged to. They would just turn into the houses. I visited Szék, which is quite a well-known village for photography. There's a famous Hungarian photographer called Kornis Péter, who in the 60s and 70s took lots of pictures in the village of Szék, because there they very much stuck with their traditions. And I happened to be there on Mother's Day, and there was a big celebration in the church, and everybody on Sundays always dresses in traditional clothing, but that was a particularly special day. Not everybody who I met was doing so well. This was a gentleman who I met who had recently been widowed, and you could very much see how much, you know, the role of women in society, how his house was in a state of disrepair. You know, he was obviously not doing very well because he was now living by himself. Nevertheless, he was extremely generous and offered to share his breakfast with me. Then I returned again in the summertime, and this gives you an idea of some of the, you know, the paths that I would walk. This time I went up around Brassor. There are the high mountains there, the Fogaras Mountains. And so I went up there because I had heard that it was extremely beautiful, and you know, I thought I could meet some nice people to photograph. Which I did. This lady, as you can see from the expression on her face, was extremely proud to show me her szépszoba. I spent a delightful afternoon with her, and I felt this picture best showed the pride that she felt in her room. And then this lady lives on the top of the of one of those mountains I just showed you with her son-in-law. And this is her, I think it's called Nyári Konyha, but this is really where she spends most of her time. She's incredibly active. I mean, this lady could bend down and chop wood and pick things up far faster than I could. I was embarrassed by, you know, my lack of agility compared to her, but her, I found her kitchen and her lifestyle was just wonderful. And, you know, she made me some langos, and we spent the afternoon together. And I visited her each time I went back because she was just such a remarkable woman. I mean, she hasn't been down into the village in 2 years, that she has relatives who come up, and if she needs medicine, she phones the doctor, explains her symptoms over her cell phone, and then the doctor will prescribe medicine based on what she has said, and then somebody will bring it up. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there's a famous American portrait called The American Pastoral. So this was sort of my take on it. This is a couple who were just always happy and smiling, and just seemed to be, you know, blissfully happy. And I just thought that that was such a beautiful, it was a beautiful relationship. And the fact that their dog also is devoted to them just made me very happy. This is a couple who I met who have an extremely sick child. He's in a wheelchair. And despite that, they really had such a positive outlook on life that it really made me feel sort of rather embarrassed about the things that I complain about or the things that bother me in my life. And that's one of the things that these trips really emphasize to me, is how, you know, extraordinarily lucky we are, and how, you know, our world of materialism, that especially living here in America, where, you know, I feel like my family at least, we waste food. If something's broken, we buy a new one. That being around people where they truly recycle and use everything was a really good wake-up call, and it's a good thing to remember. This is a detail of some of the things that are extremely important to life in Erdély. It seems that everybody goes to church, and making homemade pálinka and wine is extremely popular. Oopsie. And then, I don't know if you guys remember, but I remember from my time in VIP that at the end of the day, everybody would sit out on the street. All the neighbors would hang out and discuss everything that had gone on during the day, and would probably, you know, yell at us young people who were messing about. This was a delightful couple, and I just loved the fact that he's wearing baby blue and she's wearing baby pink. I just thought that, and I took a lot of pictures of them, but of all the formal pictures I took, I felt that this picture best encapsulates their relationship, and you know, I think it shows more than a formal picture where they're just staring at the camera. So yeah, this is just up again in the mountains. So this is autumn. So my third trip back was in the autumn time. And you know, I would say of my 4 trips, I felt that from a photography point of view, autumn was the most bountiful. You know, the colors, you know, the pumpkins are just so photogenic. People were very busy getting ready for winter, that it was an awful lot of things to see and do, and it was just lovely to be there. This is that same gentleman who was sitting with his wife. In autumn, everybody was picking mushrooms, and I had so many mushrooms that trip. I think every meal would have revolved around mushrooms. And you know, I remember as a child always being, you know, my grandparents always being really worried and taking the gomba to the szakember to make sure that it was a good mushroom to eat. And you know, but when I was there this time, nobody seemed to be worried about it. They seemed to know their mushrooms and didn't need to go and have them inspected. So when I would go, I would often have little gifts with me, because if you're asking somebody to take a picture of them, I felt that often it would be nice to give. So I had, as you can see, chocolates. I would take some coffee. I had a few things from, you know, Boston, like tea towels. And this was a lovely lady who, as you can see, was extremely happy to receive the chocolates. And the fact that the chocolates and her clothes are the same color, just I thought made a lovely picture. Yeah, this is still in the autumn time, collecting the potatoes. This is a slightly sadder picture. You know, at first you don't really notice, but you know, her husband is wrapped up in a blanket here. But she was very kind. I spent the day with her. I don't know how her husband is doing now. And then I think this is moving into winter. And, you know, you can sort of, this is a lady collecting firewood. And this is when I went back in the wintertime. And this was the hardest time to photograph because there just weren't that many people outside. And the snow made it, you know, it was more difficult for me to get about. But I did still manage to get a few pictures. And I love the fact that this guy's kind of smiling at me. This again was up in the mountains around Brasov. And this is that lady Anna, whose kitchen I showed you, you know, a little while ago. This is not in that same sort of kitchen garden that she was using. This is actually in her main house. But this was one of the few people I met, new people I met on that trip. He was a shepherd. He had very little, he had nothing really in his house. And I was a little wary about going into his house, but you know, he turned out to be a very nice man, and spent a little time with him. Oh, this was a couple who were celebrating their 60 years of marriage. I mean, I kind of did the math and I was like, she must have been about 15, 16 when she got married, but they were very nice and they were still together and they were very happy. When I met them again and I took this picture back to them and they gave it to their children. So this is a place, it's where the villagers go to make palinka. So rather than everybody making palinka for themselves, there was this hut where you could take your fruit and you know, make palinka. This was the lady who was in charge of it. But this was like the hive of activity at the weekend. There were lots and lots of people here. Everybody had an opinion on how much fruit, how much water. There was a lot of testing going on to make sure it was the right consistency, the right strength. And we had a lot of fun there. But I mean, overall, you know, I have to say that, you know, if I was walking around my hometown here in Winchester, you know, I wouldn't be invited into people's homes. You know, I wouldn't be drinking palinka. I wouldn't be, people wouldn't be making me food. So as a way of working through my feelings about my father's death and just reconnecting with a part of my childhood that I had thought was lost. This experience, I was just fabulous. And even if I hadn't managed to take pictures, it would have been worthwhile just as for the experience. Having pictures, of course, being a photographer is great, but this is so much more to me than just a photo project. And I think that is the end of my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, if you want to put them in chat or ask me, I'm happy to answer anything. But I also think I'm probably nearing the end of my time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Katalina. It was a beautiful presentation. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm grateful you shared all the memories you had and all these beautiful photographs. So yes, you're right about the time. Unfortunately, we are getting close to the other program. We are about starting soon. But I am sure if could you be so nice and put down your website address here in the chat so people could maybe write to you or
Sure. I'll put it in the chat so you guys can continue with the program, but I'll put it in the chat for everybody.
yes.
I have a question. Are the photos accessible online? Is this exhibit still available to look back at?
Yeah, I think it's still up at the Acton Public Library has a virtual exhibition of them, and I have a lot of them on my website. So I'll put my website in the chat, and you can check them out there.
Okay, thank you. They were really beautiful.
Yeah.
When was the last time when you were there?
The last time was at Christmas as well, after Christmas, so January of 2019.
Oh,
So-
wow.
Mm.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing.
thank you. And if any of you would like to join the next program, which will be the virtual tour from Budapest, please switch, from Zoom to the webinar link. Thank you, Katalina.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
To switch to the other, if everyone should have the schedule in their email.